what makes your house different than everyone else's house? Maybe you live in a unique location. Maybe your house has some historical significance. Maybe you have some epic outdoor living space, or I don't know, maybe a home music studio. Maybe there's an elevator in your house. I don't know, a fire pole, something. But whether your home you think is distinct or not, of course it's very special. And what makes your house ultimately different than everybody else's house is the fact that you live there. That you live there with the other people that you may live with, and that what makes it unique and special and different. Today we hear that Jesus talks about this Father's house, in which there are many dwelling places that he is preparing for us. But also in our second reading from 1 Peter, we hear that we're to be built up as living stones into a kind of a spiritual structure. So we talk about us dwelling with God, and God for dwelling with us. So the fact that we live in God and God lives in us should make us different. Makes us special. It makes us unique. That our dignity is so great that the God of the universe looks to live in us in him. So what does this difference look like? Of course, it can be played out in so many ways in our life, but I think we can look to our scriptures for some good examples. So St. Peter says that we're like living stones to be built up into a spiritual house. He says, let yourselves be built up into a spiritual house. So even allowing God to continue to work on us, that by his grace and his word to keep us growing in our life and in our life of faith. He says, let yourself be built up into a spiritual house to become a holy priesthood, to make spiritual sacrifices. Of course, there's the ministerial priesthood, but all the baptized share in this priesthood of Christ, because we're all meant, like priests do, to offer prayers, to offer our worship to God, and that all of us are called to enter into that life of sacrifice. Ultimately, it's sharing in Jesus' great priesthood of offering himself out of love for others so that they might have life, so that we might have life. That sacrifice might involve time or energy. It might take some of our calendar. We might have to sacrifice our priorities, our wants. There's so many ways that we sacrifice and for the good of others, out of love for them. And in that, we're being built up into this holy priesthood to make spiritual sacrifices. We hear too in our second reading, St. Peter quotes from Isaiah when he talks about this cornerstone that is chosen and precious. And he says, if you believe in it, you will not be put to shame. That we have Christ as our cornerstone, as our true and sure foundation. And so we have nothing to fear in life, not even death, of course, because Christ has risen from it. St. Peter says this has value for you who believe. It reminds me, too, of that line in the gospel where Jesus says, do not let your hearts be troubled. This is the night before he was going to enter into his suffering and death. He says, don't let your hearts be troubled. There's so many things that can trouble our hearts. Which is why we need Jesus as the cornerstone in our life. We hear too Jesus say that I am the way and the truth and the life. We all have this desire, every single person here in church, outside of church, those driving by, those around the world, deep down have the desire to know a way and to know truth and to have life and meaning and purpose in life. And there's so many different things that are clamoring to be the answer to that. But Jesus says, I am the way and the truth and the life. Which for someone to say that is either crazy talk or it's true, is the God incarnate. Because it's true, it should make the difference for us in our life and it's how we approach it. The end of our passage from 1 Peter, we also hear him quote from Exodus 19 where he says, you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people that God has claimed as his own, to go and announce the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light, to announce the praises of God, to share with others what God has done in our life, to be willing to witness to the difference that God makes in our life, to go out and to help others to know God in their lives as well, and to even pray with them. And then finally, we hear at the end of our gospel passage, Jesus says that his disciples would do the works that he does and will do even greater works than him because he is going to the Father. And we think, how can we do greater works than Jesus? Of course, we are all caught up in his great body of the church. Spread throughout the world, we can think of the countless number of people who are being prayed for, who are receiving sacraments, who are sharing the gospel, who are experiencing signs and wonders. It's how Jesus has greater works through his body, the church, and that all of us are caught up in that, just in our own little corner of the world. So all these different ways we have Christ living in us and us having our life in Christ. And we know, of course, in a special way here in the Mass and the Eucharist, that literally Christ dwells within us. Because you and I were made for a holy communion with the God of the universe. So as we encounter Christ here in the Mass today, let us indeed know the great dignity that we have as beloved sons and daughters of God, and let our living in God and God living in us truly make all the difference.